This is a commentary over my most recent personal best on Owlboy. Alright, let's get into it. So first thing we're going to do is skip the cutscene. Second thing we're going to do is basically we are in this town called Veli, and what I'm going to do is Owlboy doesn't really like walls that much, as you'll notice. So in this any percent speedrun, we're probably going to be out of bounds more than we're going to be in bounds. So a lot of people rename this category out of bounds boy any percent. So the first trick that we're going to do, Otis is the name of the main character of this game, and he can do a bunch of different things. He can jump, he can fly, and he can pick up items. And he can also hit projectiles. So when he picks up items in this game, so he's going to pick up a piece of food, and if I am holding down both left and right click, I'm going to do something called a food zip, which is what you just saw right there. And what a food zip is it gives me a ton of momentum in a direction, and it basically gets me out of bounds. So now I'm going to go back inbounds by grabbing this pot, and I'm going to go get inside the cave, and I just skipped probably about 20 minutes of gameplay, and now I have my very first character, or partner, named Getty. So what I can do is I can pick him up and shoot these barrels. So Otis on his own is not able to shoot anything or do any damage. He's able to stun enemies, and he uses different partners. You'll get 3 different partners throughout the run. So this first area is called Veli Cave, and I'm going to do another food zip. That food zip was an early cancel, which means I right-clicked twice, and I ended my momentum early. And now the rest of this section of this cave is just going to be hitting cutscene triggers and activating different cutscenes. So the first thing I did was make one of the characters laugh, and then I activated this cutscene trigger. I'm going to proceed through the cave, hit a screw, which is the only screw we're going to be hitting this run. There's a lot of screws throughout the game, and yet we're only going to be hitting one. Alright, next food zip is also going to be an early cancel. Wasn't perfect, so I'm going to hit the next trigger, which is right next to that rock. And the rest of this cave is basically just hitting cutscene triggers. So the next part is basically going to be a boss skip. So if you hit a cutscene and you're not on a certain area of the actual trigger itself, you will fly towards the boss, but you won't actually enter the area, so you're going to stay out of bounds. So currently we're out of bounds, and as long as we land on the top area of the cutscene trigger, we should be perfectly fine. Yeah, we're good. And now we can stay out of bounds and fly directly towards the next area, or the next cutscene. There's going to be some layering of dialogue. It doesn't sound very nice, but it is what it is. Actually, it sounds beautiful. So now we're all tied up, and we're going to rock back and forth. The optimal way to do this is starting with left and then going right, and then basically hitting him. Something that I'm doing throughout this, something that was very nice the developers left in, was that if you hold F while you are playing the game and there's a cutscene that occurs, you actually just skip all the dialogue. So I'm not going to be hitting buttons or mashing buttons just to try to skip text, which is very nice, left in by the developers. So the next thing I'm going to try to do is on this teleporter. This is a teleporter object, and what it allows me to do is basically the mechanic of this game is that when I have partners, I'm able to pick them up from anywhere just by pressing various buttons on my keyboard. What I usually like to use is mouse wheel or the numbers. So this is like the mechanic of the game, and if I'm flying and then I press the teleporter button, I'm able to just pick them up straight away. So I'm going to activate this button. Next thing I'm going to do is called the partner clip. I stand on top of a block and I pick up my buddy and I clip through the wall. And the reason that works is because my partner has a very large hitbox, and when I stand on top of a block, the hitbox of my partner pushes me through to an area where I'm allowed to hold him, but I'm not technically supposed to be there, and we can abuse that. That's the first time that we're going to use that in the run. We're going to use it 2 other times. We're going to abuse that so we can get out of bounds to get at areas we're not supposed to be yet. So the next trick coming up is also a food zip. first part is just going to be optimizing my movement. So basically we're going to fly. These are pirate ships, they're just kind of attacking us, you know, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. So we're going to do a food zip, and this is going to be a reverse food zip. So as you actually start the zip and you press the opposite direction, you go further in the direction that you were initially facing, and we're going to hit the next cutscene trigger. So we were not technically supposed to leave that area that early, and that creates quite a few problems that you'll see a little later in the run when we return to Valley. And so the pirates, they're not very happy with us, and they become so upset that you'll enjoy it. I'll explain later. So the next part is we're going to getting into Owl Temple early. So this is Owl Temple entrance. This is the area, so there's like a very long platforming section, and all I'm going to do is just do a normal food zip without pushing anything, and we are in Owl Temple. So we're in Owl Temple. I'm going to restart the checkpoint, so I skip past this cutscene. I'm going to be doing another partner clip, so I grab my partner, drop him, move down a little bit, and then pick him back up, and then I'm out of bounds. Now I'm going to be doing another reverse food zip, and this food zip will bring me out of bounds. And now I'm going to go to the area where I will be getting my next partner named Alphonse. Alphonse is going to be the majority of our damage. So Getty is able to do like a 3-round burst, like minor damage attack, and then Alphonse has a shotgun which has a cooldown period. And the cooldown period itself is just about maybe 3 seconds long-ish. I'm going to be throwing Getty onto the platform. I missed this, but if I were to right-click, I would fall through. The next person there is Alphonse. So this is Alphonse. I'm going to try to skip this cutscene by pressing escape right as the cutscene is about to play, and it works. Now I need to restart the checkpoint because Alphonse initially is an actual boss character. So now we're able to clear these vines that we weren't able to before because he has like a flamethrower type thing. And we're going to do another partner clip to just get out of bounds. And we get it. So this partner clip allows us to get out of bounds, and basically once we have Alphonse, the only reason we came to Owl Temple is because if we don't get Alphonse, there's a part later in the game where we will actually crash the game if we don't have our partner. The reason for this is that when the game tries to play text for a character that is not currently, like, quote-unquote in your party, you don't have access to them, the game doesn't get very happy, and it immediately crashes the game. So we're going to try to avoid this. Generally we're going to just go around, and once we get towards the next area, there's a cutscene that's supposed to play. The problem with this cutscene is that it wasn't programmed. It's programmed differently than all the other cutscenes. So if you hit skip cutscene, the screen is completely black. So I'm going to blindly move towards the next area, reload checkpoint, and then I'm out of black, which is much faster than the other way that I could do it. This is just general movement. But the interesting thing about that is that if you can also just watch the cutscene itself, and it will finish playing, and it won't lose you that much time, but it's faster to just move blindly towards the next area to the next checkpoint, and then reload checkpoint, and then you're good. So this next one is going to be another reverse clip, and we get the food zip, and now we're going to be going to get our next partner. His name is Twig. You might have seen him earlier. He was laughing in Valley Cave. But first we're going to be doing another partner clip, so I jump up, hit the wall, get Getty, move down, get Getty, move back up, and now we're out of bounds. The interesting thing about this is that initially early Twig was not available, but again, the developers were very nice and they allowed us to get Twig very early. So if we actually go into this area, we just immediately go to the cutscene where we get Twig. So I'm holding F. Talk about the language. This language is the fastest. It saves about 2 minutes throughout the run. There's some unskippable text cutscenes, and there's sometimes that text won't get skipped. And because text is shorter in this language, it saves a lot of time. It saves about 2 minutes throughout the run. So now I'm going to be doing the easiest out of bounds glitch in the game. So if you talk to Twig, and you're in this current state in the game, and you're right next to a wall on your right. What will happen is Twig will say hi to you, and you'll just get clipped inside the wall. And then I held F so that I skipped all the dialogue. And now we are in Mothership early. And that saves a lot of time. This is a very late game area. So there I clipped a vent and I dropped Twig to prevent a soft lock, because if I don't, there's a chance that I am just unable to move after this cutscene. So now we get to the vents. There are these vents. This is the Mothership area, which is a very large section of the game. And the whole interesting thing is that we lose our first partner, Alphonse. And Alphonse is going to be going throughout the ship, and there's going to be a bunch of different areas, and there's going to be these vents that we're going to go through. And there are these bombs that are going through there, and they one-hit kill you, so if you are not moving correctly, you will just instantly die to them. Although the interesting thing is that if you press the melee button with Otis about 4 frames before you get hit, you actually are able to parry the bomb and it'll just explode itself. So now we're going to basically moving throughout the vents. The interesting thing about the vents is that there's going to be a huge time-saving skip that's going to be coming up. Very simple to do, just basically push buttons. We don't know exactly why it works, but basically what happens is characters. Oh yeah, I'll also have to boop Otis's nose anytime I remember to do that. I gotta boop Otis's nose. So anytime that we're in an event, we're actually not allowed to have any partners being flying through there. But the only time, yeah, so now I'm gonna hit both bombs because I'm cool, and not take any damage. So the only time we're allowed to have our partners in the vent is when we are in a vertical vent. But if we're in a horizontal part of the vent, we're not allowed to have our partner in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to this next area, basically open a vent that's above me, as long as I can get in there. So now we grab our partner, grab the vent cover, let go of it, and now I'm in a state where the game thinks that I don't have my partner, but I actually have the ability to grapple. I'm going to grab on, let go, and then move down. And then I just am able to just clip out of bounds. When we discovered this, it was like a huge deal because it saves a lot of time, and it's not even that difficult to do. For the actual run, I'll play that cutscene there. It's very funny. It was unintended, left in by the developers. It's basically just like a filler cutscene. There's 2 of those in the game. So we're going to be prepping for the first boss fight of the run. There are 2 boss fights in the any percent category. The very first one is a person named Dirk. Dirk you saw one time in the Mothership, and he just doesn't like us very much. For anyone that played this game casually, I know a lot of people had trouble with Dirk. I personally had trouble with Dirk the very first time I played the game, but a little bit into the run, I think that if you've played this game, you'll enjoy what we're able to do to Dirk. So first thing I'm going to do is skip this cutscene. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. There's no optimal way. What I like to do is I like to approach a wall in the very first phase and then just walk. He's going to be throwing knives at me. I can't do any damage to him during this phase. I can only do damage to him at very specific times. So what I'm going to do is he's going to try to lunge at me. I'm going to clip to the wall and shoot him. And basically I have to do that 3 times, so I have to avoid his attacks and then shoot him with Alphonse after avoiding his attacks 3 times. So now he's going to be throwing 3 knives, so I have to be a little more involved. So what I like to do is I like to move to the left and then move up and then move back down. And we're going to do that a 3rd time, and then we can get into the 3rd phase. So the 3rd phase is very difficult if anyone has played this game casually, but I'm going to show you something interesting. So if you get knocked to the left by Dirk on this very first phase, or on the 3rd phase, forgive me, something interesting happens. So if you move to the left slightly, yeah, you can't hit by any more attacks. So this 3rd phase is just completely not anything to worry about. And there's it's pretty lenient. I believe it was actually shown to us by the developers. I don't think we found it on our own. So it was a developer-intended escape or strat. And now we're going to shoot Dirk. And now we get to the best part of the run, which is called donation percent, because it's just a bunch of cutscenes. 7 minutes of cutscenes to be exact. And there's actually nothing that really important that happens once we get to the cutscene percent. So we finish off Dirk, his mask falls off, and he basically has a revelation about life and its existence, and he has a good time. So now that we finished off Dirk, we're going to something called the Relic Room, and in the Relic Room, there's a cutscene that will play, but we don't know the exact specifics of it. The cutscene itself will either play immediately after a certain period of time, or if you don't do any damage. So there's a bunch of relics that are locked up that you'll see in a little bit, and once that cutscene starts, or the timer starts, basically if you do damage to these metal containers, the cutscene will play faster. But sometimes it's very consistent because it'll either play much faster or it won't play as fast. But if you don't touch anything, it will always play 11 seconds slower. So basically we just do a bunch of damage and hope that it works. And after this part is cutscene percent. So I'll just leave you to it, and I will resume commentary once we get past that part. I will see you then. Okay, so I am back, and now we are going back to Veli. So this is Veli after Mothership, And remember how I talked about how Veli was a little bit messed up? Yeah, so the pirates were really angry. So now they turn off their searchlights, but they didn't actually turn them off. They made them completely invisible. So any rocks they shoot at us, and any rocks that I would get hit by, are completely invisible. So the next thing we're going to do is that you'll notice that we saw a cutscene that maybe didn't look like it was supposed to happen. This is because that was a cutscene from the very first part in the game that we completely skipped. So the character that you just saw, basically we'll only see one other time, and that's when we leave this area. So basically these are the scientists. We're realizing that, well, story-wise, lore-wise, we don't really know a whole lot about this world, so these scientists made a machine, and this machine allows them to detect things in the sky. So they notice that there's something above a place where it shouldn't be. Oh, here's the guy that we saw. Oh, no, he's gone again. We'll never see him ever again in this entire run. So now we're going to a tower that looks very interesting. So they told us that we kind of need to go to space, and don't really know why. But we're just going to do that because the scientist said it so, and the scientists know best, right? So now she has her maniacal laugh, and it turns out that that tower that just broke off, yeah, it's a rocket ship. Just don't worry about it. So they have rocket ships, but they don't have GPS for whatever reason, because that's how that works. So there's a cutscene that's going to be interesting. So we're going to look at the science station. There's supposed to be a person there, but he's completely invisible because we just completely screwed up everything that was actually supposed to happen. Everything's out of order. And now we see all these characters that we've literally never met before. Yeah, these are Twig's parents and his brother, or his dad and his brother, and now we are going to space. So, interesting about space is that at all other points in the game, Otis was able to fly and he could have partners. The problem with space is that the air is too thin. So technically, it's not that we can't fly, it's just that we can't fly for very long. So you'll notice as Otis comes out of the spaceship, he tries to fly, and then he's not able to fly. And you'd think that this would be a very bad thing for us, but it turns out that we're going to be able to do some interesting things with that. So the fastest form of movement in space is spin dashing, which is done by pressing roll and then pressing the melee button. But the fastest I'm not able to do consistently, so I just roll normally, which is about just as fast. Something else, difference, so you can run this game either with a controller, or you can run this game with a computer mouse and a keyboard. And basically some of the interesting differences is that with a mouse and keyboard, as long as you bind roll to a button that isn't space, it will automatically roll on every frame possible. So basically it will just auto roll, so you just hold down the button and it will just automatically roll. On a controller that doesn't happen, but the difference is that on controller a lot of tricks are a little bit easier to do. So when you're doing the Dirk fight, you don't need to actually move around. All you can do is you can get basically almost completely invincible. So if you use Twig and you grapple with Twig and then you release grapple early, you get a ton of invincibility frames, so you're basically completely invincible the whole fight. It's very difficult to do on PC, so it's just not done. So the first part of space is basically going to be a bunch of platforming, and in space you have one charge of flight, and then when it releases you have to fall back down to the ground. And sometimes you'll notice I'm going to be going in midair and then instantly noticing that I'm flashing white. So if you use a charge of flight and it doesn't completely finish and you don't see a flash of white, the next time that you go back up in the air, it will immediately make it so that you're in the state where you're falling back to the ground. So this is the first section of platforming, basically just optimizing movement and jumping, trying not to fly as much as possible because flying is semi-slow, and then I fly and then I fall back down and back to the ground. So here is the first, this is the major skip of the run in space. It's called Book Room Skip Skip or Library Skip Skip. So initially what you had to do is you had to get Alphonse, get it so that you were in a state where you're able to pick up Alphonse, and then throw Alphonse frame perfectly over 100 times in order to get to the next area. But what we figured out a little later is that you could skip that skip, known as library skip, and what we're going to do is we're going to use this spinning platform to clip into the ground, clip into these spikes, and get in a state where we're able to fly. And what I'm going to be doing is a bunch of very specific inputs where I'm going to right click and then press up again very quickly. It's very precise, and I'm going to gain a ton of height, and then what I can do is fly and then jump, and then I'm past the library, which is much easier than the initial library skip. So the rest of this is just optimizing movement. Something that I like to do is something you watch me do right here. So if you hold shift or your roll button and then you move in a direction after you hold flight, you actually gain a ton of speed in that direction. It's extremely useful in the section that's about to come up right here. So I'm going to jump to this platform, and then I'm going to do 3 skips, so I'm going to skip these rocks. So that boost that you see is me inputting those actions very quickly. And now we're going to skip an auto-scroller, yay! We don't have to do auto-scrollers, no auto-scrollers this block. So I'm basically going to hit this trigger, jump out, and interesting thing is that I'm not technically in the trigger, so if I skip the cutscene, then it puts me right past the entire auto-scroller, which saves about 2 minutes of auto-scroller time. So now we are getting to the last fight of the game, which is known as Solace. Solace is basically this character that initially stole the relics. You might have seen him earlier, and the cool thing about this is that now we're able to fly again, even though we're in space. Don't worry about why, just we can, because game requires it. So now we need to shoot the relics off of Solace with all 3 different partners. We need to do enough damage. The nice thing about Alphonse is that his relic immediately gets shot off. So the first 2 phases is basically just optimizing this. Hopefully we don't get that pattern. That pattern's really annoying to deal with just because it does a lot of damage and it's very hard to shoot. So the one that we want to get is the one where he grabs a pod, because that's the best pattern for him to do. So this is about most of the RNG that happens in this run is decided. So world record pace is basically decided by this fight alone. At least once it gets super optimized, it's probably going to be like that. Once we figure out a way to influence everything. So this is the optimal phase because it just allows us to just sit here and shoot him without moving our mouse much. It just makes it easier. Oh, we got this pattern again, not so bad. So once we knock the final relic off of him, I'm not going to shoot him with the shotgun because I want to use the shotgun for the next phase. So in the next phase, it completely switches up, and now he basically has a health amount. So in this damage amount that he has, we need to deal enough damage to him to have him end the fight. So this part, he deals a lot of damage with those projectiles. If I was playing on a controller, one of the other differences between that and a controller is I'm actually able to spin while I'm holding a partner, and I could have reflected those projectiles back at him, but since I'm on PC, I'm not able to do that. Or since I'm on mouse and keyboard. And now we did enough damage to him, and that is Solace. So that was the last difficult part of the run. Everything else is pretty much one long cutscene. It's very this game is very near and dear to me. So I got this game maybe a few months ago, and ever since I couldn't put it down. I started playing it, and I just absolutely love it. The developers are super active, and they talk about just how they've developed it. There's a whole bunch of interviews that they've done. This game was in development for around 9 years. The interesting thing that they did is that although it was a pixelated game, they didn't focus on making the music pixelated. They had a fully live orchestra, and just the way that everything looks, and it really gives the environment a feeling of being alive. And I think this probably is one of my favorite games of all time. And if you've never speedrun a game before, I would say that Any% is probably the very if you've never tried to speedrun a game, I would say to try this game. If you've just, like, you've always been telling yourself, hey, this is kind of what I did, but like, hey, you know what, I've been watching speedrunning for like maybe 5 years, it just seems really cool, but I can't get into it because it looks super complicated. I would say this is the run to start with. I've been speedrunning this game for around a week and a half, and I am already in the top 10 of speedrunners, so that just shows you how not necessarily simple this game is, but the fact that if you put in the time, it's very easy to learn. There's so many people that are willing to help, and there's so many people in this community that I couldn't live without. There's video tutorials. The developers are extremely active, and they're always talking. And also, it's not that intensive of a speedrun either. It's very quick, in, out, done. The tricks are not extremely difficult to do, but the difference is it's like easy to learn, hard to master. That's what I would say about the speedrun. But overall, I love GDQ and everything that speedrunning community has done. So basically now this is like a section where we are hitting this totem pole. And basically, this is like the last major, like, actual interactable thing that we have. And once we hit the totem pole, the world is, I guess, saved, kind of. It's kind of an ambiguous ending. So we start falling back towards the ground, because you noticed before everything was kind of going upwards, and now it's not. So this bad dude, he's just kind of like, seems like a really bad dude. We don't actually have to worry about him too much, though, because in a little bit, you'll notice something interesting that happens with him. Seems like kind of a bad guy, He has like this giant anchor that he holds. Interesting thing, though, is that now we have absorbed this power from this totem pole that we've activated. Also, something interesting, the first time I played this game, if you don't activate the totem pole fast enough, he actually throws his anchor at you and instantly kills you, so that was something to look out for. Loses a lot of time. If you don't do it fast enough. So, yeah, he thinks that the little spark can't hurt him, but it turns out it can. Yeah. So, it's very convenient that we don't have to fight him, because I think that would probably be a very difficult fight. So, it turns out all of the outcasts of the town managed to actually just, like, save the world, and, like, they just managed to do it. So, this next part is called Dream, and I don't really have an explanation for why it exists, it's just kind of there. So after we save the world, how to optimize this is basically if you press D very rhythmically, or you press to the right very rhythmically, you actually gain a boost in movement, because the movement is very different. There's no rolling, there's no anything else. So then if you press right then up, you kind of like flap your wings and you gain a ton of upwards momentum. And it'll be showcased here in a little bit. Basically, this part is just optimizing movement, trying to get there to the end as fast as possible. And coming up will be time, once we lose control, and time. So that is my personal best speedrun of Owlboy any percent. Gonna keep practicing the game just because I love the mechanics. There's so many different categories, like there's any percent, there's 100%, and then some of the other ones are any percent, no out of bounds, so there's no food zips, it's just solving bosses in maybe semi-unintended ways, or ways that initially was not intended to be. And then there's also all bosses, which is basically using any percent skips, but going to routing to all bosses. So yeah, that was Owlboy any percent. I hope you guys have a nice day, and take care.